Bentornati, in particolare adesso avremo il primo keynote della Social Media Week di Milano, ma prima vorrei raccontarvi l'esperienza che succede in questa sala con le luci e twittando voi potete proprio trasformare il mood di questa sala. In pratica ci siamo ispirati ai filtri di Instagram e insieme a Philips abbiamo creato questi 4 hashtag che vedete qua menzionati, che se voi twitterete usando questi hashtag, dicendo qual è il vostro preferito, ogni 20 minuti le luci della sala cambieranno. Questo perché da un lato volevamo passare dal mondo fisico al digitale e viceversa, ma anche avere uno stimolo che viene anche dalla platea, sia perché seguono via streaming o perché siete qui presenti e possono dare un messaggio ai relatori. In questo caso i 4 mood non sono associati a uno stato particolare, ma era proprio un esperimento che volevamo fare durante la Social Media Week. Quindi vi invito a usare questi 4 hashtag e adesso a modo d'esempio vediamo il Hue 1977 per vedere come cambiano queste luci. Se guardate anche indietro vedete come le tonalità di rossi e di rosa della sala stanno cambiando. Adesso prima di presentare alla moderatrice abbiamo fatto una piccola intervista stamattina con Rohan che vorremmo condividere in questo momento. Video per favore.
So it's great to be here in Milan for Social Media Week, and I'm really looking forward to this topic called digital meditation. And what that's really about is this question of how can we use technology to support our minds and our inner lives? Because so much of nowadays technology is often considered to be negative. It sort of ruins our concentration span and makes us really stressed. And people think that that's just what technology is like. But through the work that I'm doing around how we apply the techniques of meditation and mindfulness to software and mobile phone technology, we're starting to see that actually we can use the world of technology to actually support positive qualities. And that's a really, really interesting topic because I don't think it's not sustainable for us as a society to be always in a difficult relationship with technology. So anything we can do to make our relationship with technology a positive, happy, beautiful one is a great thing.
Durante lo speech, sia che ci state seguendo in streaming o qui in sala, potete twittare le vostre domande a Daniela che dopo la presentazione di Rohan modererà una sessione di Q&A. E adesso infatti vorrei presentare Daniela Cerrato che è la Head of Digital Marketing Properties del gruppo Mondadori. Daniela, lascio a te.
Grazie Gianfranco e grazie a tutti per essere qui. Devo fare un piccolo, probabilmente un nostro, come sempre succede nella tecnologia, il bello della diretta, il mio nickname di Twitter è un po' complesso e qui manca una R, io ne ho tante di R, quindi è Cherry Girl doppia R, dopo la GRRL, quindi se mandate le vostre domande anche chi è in remoto cercheremo di tradurle per Rohan e così gli rispondiamo in diretta. Ma io semplicemente sono un po', farò la madrina della serata e sono molto contenta e orgogliosa di poter far parte di questo panel perché in qualità di appassionata del mondo social e del mondo digitale dai primi tempi e in qualità di testimone anche di tutto il mondo dell'informazione digitale, della ricerca dei contenuti in rete negli ultimi anni, in particolar modo sul mondo femminile, ma anche in passato. Oggi io mi occupo appunto nelle properties di Mondadori, di siti come donnamoderna.com, ma in passato anche in Virgilio. Noi vediamo sempre di più che nei siti di largo consumo, nei siti dove la gente si va a informare come noi tutti i giorni, c'è una crescente bisogno e domanda di informazione per quello che riguarda il nostro benessere, per lo star bene, come magari anche la tecnologia può aiutarci e credo che oggi sentiremo delle risposte interessanti da Rohan per fare in modo che questi oggetti non distruggano la nostra vita e non la rendano più stressante, ma anzi ci possano aiutare a viverla con maggiore serenità, con maggiore cura della nostra mindfulness, che è poi il tema sul quale Rohan batte molto. Io adesso lascerei la parola a lui, che è stato battezzato da Wired come uno dei più importanti personaggi del 2012, uno dei personaggi che cambierà il mondo, così è stato battezzato per le sue attività appunto creative di sviluppo nel mondo digitale di app e soluzioni anche per star bene, per risolvere i problemi della nostra vita, e oggi ci racconterà anche questa Buddhify 2, che è la nuova app che la sua società ha sviluppato per aiutarci a meditare con il nostro smartphone. Quindi la parola a Rohan, accogliamolo con un bel applauso.
Oops, I'm smaller than most people. Thank you very much for having me, and apologies I can't share with you my story in Italian, but maybe next time. And I want to, today I do want to tell you a couple of stories, and I guess the big story that I'm interested in is around how we can develop technologies that are good for us, because that's not the story that we currently have around technology. And social media, and particularly popular technologies, our everyday technologies and communications technologies. We have a relationship that is often very difficult, and so I'm really interested in how we turn that around. So I'll be talking a little bit about that. And there'll be many of you in the room who, back in when was it, sort of 2001, when Nintendo brought out the Wii and Wii Fit and that whole generation of products, that changed how, that was a really significant moment in popular technology, because suddenly we had technologies which people were using to improve our physical health. And now I'm sure that I won't ask you who's doing them right now, but I'm sure there's at least maybe a quarter of us in the room who use certain apps to help us with our physical health, be that tracking our diet or exercise. Some of us might have Nike Fuel Bands and all these different types of wearables, and as a way of supporting our fitness and our physical health. And so we've seen since the launch of Nintendo Wii, a big change in how technology is being used to support positive physical health. And I'm basically putting a big bet on that mental health is the next big thing in technology, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. But I'm going to start by telling, if you won't mind me indulging you all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal story, because I think that might help set the context for it. So it actually quite ironically starts very much connected with Italy and Italian. So like most people growing up in the UK, I was born in 1980, and so a very magical thing happened in 1990 called Italia 90. And everyone in my generation of young boys who loved football fell in love with Italy at that time. It was the only time when England were vaguely good in our lifetime in the national football team. And so 10 years ago, fast forward to 10 years ago, it was in my last year at university, and I had a lot of spare time on my hands. And it was one of those times in a very luxurious time of my life where I thought, I've got time to do the things that I've never got around to do before, because I was either too busy with study and so on. And the number one thing on my list was to learn Italian. And so I went to the place in the university that ran all these courses, and I tried to sign up for the Italian course, but I just missed the last spot. And I was very disappointed, but I still had lots of time on my hands. And so I looked through the rest of the classes, and there was something related to meditation. I thought, I'll try that. So if that hadn't happened, maybe I'd certainly be fluent in Italian, and I've had 10 years of doing all sorts of things related to this great country. But instead, unfortunately, I went to that meditation class. Over those 10 years, I got more and more interested in meditation and this thing called mindfulness. And so just for those of you who don't have a lot of maybe background in this sort of stuff, meditation is a sort of general word that is used to mean that you sort of basically training your mind in certain ways, using certain techniques, in such a way, with the result that you develop positive mental qualities. And those positive mental qualities are things like calm, they're things like compassion, they're things like self-awareness, they're things about understanding how your mind works and how your experience works. And for me, that was what really ignited my interest. Because when you, I don't know how many of you have gone to or tried meditation or gone to a class, and something very funny happens when you do your first meditation exercise. You see that your mind is crazy and all over the place, and you sort of take this time, you look inside, and it's like, whoa, my mind is just like jumping all over the place, and it's so many thoughts and so much stuff going on. And at that point, you have typically one of two things happens. Some people go, whoa, that's just too much. I don't want to look at that again. I'm perfectly happy as I am, and I'll just get on with the rest of my life. And other people go, oh, that's actually really interesting. There's this whole thing going on inside of me, which I'd never really looked at very closely. And I was in that camp. And so I became increasingly interested in what was happening inside my mind and learning all these skills and ways of exploring that in deeper and deeper ways. And so over the sort of the last 10 years in which I've been exploring meditation, I've done the typical stuff that you expect, like meditation junkies to do. So this is this is a picture from. Oh, you can't see the picture, but there's a. Can you see the picture? Can we see the picture? So I've basically been all around the world in different places and settings. This photo is from a place called Wat Pah Nanachat in northeast Thailand. And this is basically the Piazza del Duomo of that monastery. It's the busiest part of the forest, and that's basically as pretty much the busiest it gets. So this is the kind of place where, if you want to stay there, and I stayed this place for 3 weeks, you have to shave your head, including your eyebrows. So it's pretty hardcore. You get one meal a day at 7:30 in the morning. You get assigned a hut in the jungle, which is surrounded by all sorts of creepy crawlies and snakes and ants that are incredibly painful when you stand on them. And it's incredibly exciting and a really great environment these are specially designed environments to look at your mind. That these sort of be it a retreat center or a forest monastery like this, they're all specially designed. They're laboratories, so that we as meditators can have a really good set of conditions to go deep into this meditation stuff. And that's sort of the traditional way that sort of meditation's been taught. And in a lot of it's still the traditional way in which meditation is perceived as being something you do that lives really far away, probably in Asia, by a guy with a big beard sitting on a mountaintop. And not really engaging with the world much. The thing is, at the same time, this was the rest of my life was here. So this is the City of London, where as soon as after I started meditating, or getting into meditation, I started a career as a business consultant at a big company called Accenture, some of you might have heard of, in London, working in a very sort of, as you'd expect, a very fast-paced corporate environment, really intense, very busy, lots of traveling, very digital, long hours, all the stuff that we know sort of corporate life to be, certainly in companies like that. And that's very far away from here. It feels very far away from here. But the thing is, personally, I realized that this was my life. I was interested and enjoying my work in London. And so I realized that the challenge to me was, how do I continue my interest in meditation in this environment, because this is what my life is. I don't want to be a monk. I don't want to live in the forest. That's not my thing. I love modern, urban, social, digital, relational life. And so my personal story is very much, I call myself a sort of meditation hacker. So I have basically hacked how meditation, for personal reasons, basically like trying to work out, taking this very traditional way. So I've trained in a very sort of classic Buddhist style, not particularly religious, but sort of does come from Buddhism, which is a very sort of monastic and traditional style. And I've basically had to learn how to apply it and how to maintain a sort of high level of practice in a much more urban environment. I'm certainly, and what was really exciting is when I first started doing that, it felt a very lonely thing, because whenever I looked around at meditation stuff, it still had that hippie forest, sort of faraway Asian look and feel. But then the more I sort of, even when in London, I started to, because when you try to find other people who are interested in stuff like this, and you join groups, but all the people in the groups were like 20 years older than me. They all came from that sort of slightly hippie background, and I couldn't really find something that was mine. But then through online communities, I was able to discover that there's a generation of people like me across the world who are trying to live this dilemma, live this beautiful tension between how do you develop the benefits of traditional meditation practice in a modern life. And then so that was all going so really interestingly and well. And then because meditation was and is such a big part of my life, and certainly in the UK, in the last 5-10 years has become really, there's a lot of interest in meditation and mindfulness, driven a lot by an increasing amount of scientific evidence and research into the benefits and effects of meditation. And even nowadays in the UK, the National Health Service basically recommends mindfulness as a therapy for certain conditions such as anxiety and depression and chronic pain. So meditation sort of become a big deal. And so people would, basically my friends or people I would engage with would always sort of say, I'd hear this all the time, which was, hey, I'm really interested in this meditation, mindfulness stuff, but, and there were always two buts. The first but was, I don't have the time. I don't have time to go to a class or a course. That's not my life. I can't commit to a Wednesday night every week for 6 weeks. I just can't do that. I've got other commitments, I've got relationships, I've got family, I've got stuff. Which is totally understandable. And the second reason the second barrier was, it's too hippie, right? It's religious, it's hippie, that's not me, I'm not that guy, I'm not that lady. So as someone who'd been, so I'd left Accenture sort of after 5 years, and I started working in different types of things related to digital innovation, either as a funder or as an investor or as a advisor to various things. And so I've been living in this world of technology, sort of popular technology, at the same time as obviously all the meditation stuff. And suddenly I thought, those two things that people keep on telling me, they're not that's not to do with meditation, they're design challenges. The reason that, and I suddenly got really interested in that, like, how can we create something which solves those two design challenges? Because meditation doesn't have to be hippie. I knew that very, very well. And it doesn't have to be, something could be designed that solves the time problem. And so that's sort of what led me to making the product I call Buddhify. So I'm not going to pitch this to you, but I'm just going to explain it just very quickly, just to help you understand the context for it. So the simple concept of Buddhify is meditation for wherever you are. So whether you're on the train, at work, going to sleep, eating, walking around, working online, in the park, all these different sort of situations. You basically tell the app what you're doing, and then it gives you guided meditation exercises specifically for that location. So instructions of how to, if you're in the gym, how do you use what's happening around you to develop compassion, which sounds like an unusual idea, but it's totally possible if you know the techniques. And because of my 10 years of having to do that myself, I knew what those techniques were, and so I was able to share them. And so that's the sort of the core concept for Buddhify. And I think, and what's really interesting is that it's really sort of ignited a lot of interest. The fact that I'm here today is a result of that. But I think this idea that actually meditation and things like this can be expressed in really contemporary ways that are all about the user. So it's called user-centered design is the process I took to design this app. So instead of, most people start with meditation or something like meditation and go, okay, how do we use videos or technology to sort of teach it in the way that we already understand? But if I just started in the other position and said, how do people use technology? Oh, they're already listening to everyone's already listening to their MP3 players or their phones during these times of the day. So if I can convince you to listen to a Buddhify track instead of listening to Justin Bieber, or whatever it is you listen to, I don't know, then that's a very small behavior change. And so that was the sort of the concept for Buddhify. And the response has been really great. So the first product I put out 2 years ago was a bit of I'd call it a modest cult success. It did pretty well. Like, it was something I just completely sort of did really on the cheap, and it made a sort of modest amount of profit and sales, and it was essentially a side project. And Buddhify 2 has basically been sort of significantly more successful than I thought it was going to be, and all the sales and stuff is really great because it gives me the revenue to be able to make more things, which I'll be doing later this year, and also to develop the product. But what's really special about this kind of work is the feedback you get from users. So this is just one user who just found it really helpful for her sleep issues. But if there's anyone in the room interested in this kind of domain of work, there's nothing more motivating than the messages that I get every day of people around the world saying how this really actually quite simple product has made a genuine effect on their lives. And when you work in the area of mental health or that kind of health, it's so different to any other kind of app or technology which can be sort of more disconnected from people's experience. This is so intimate, it's such an intimate and personal type of product. It's actually really sort of surprised and shocked me when I first started getting the emails, and it was very moving. I was speaking to someone before that there was one particular email from just a couple of weeks ago from a lawyer in New York, which basically made the whole project worthwhile. And so I really encourage people exploring the space because it's incredibly, incredibly motivating. So Buddhify 2 is sort of my sort of main first product, but it's sort of given me the encouragement and now the evidence that I can build a whole company around what I call mind positive technology, and I'm going to talk a bit about that because I think that's the most important thing. So, like I said before, when we think about technology and the mind, the most popular story right now is that it's pretty much bad for our minds. Like I was saying in that little video, we see all these reports in the media about how technology is ruining our concentration spans and our attention is fragmented. People aren't able to focus in any way. It's maybe impacting people's relationships and so on. And so that's the story we tell ourselves around technology. And so all of that has resulted in us essentially having a relationship of anxiety with technology. And I wouldn't be surprised if most people in the room will recognize that. The sort of sense of, when you sort of think of your emails or of all the messages or all the sort of ways in which we engage with technology, it can actually make us feel really stressed. What's really interesting is that I don't think that's intrinsic to technology. I just think it's because it's badly designed. And so at the moment, we have three main ways in which we deal with this problem. The first one is we run away, we retreat. So there's a very popular trend at the moment called digital detox, where you turn your phones off for a day in the week, or where you take some time away from your technology. And that can be a really effective thing to do, and I definitely encourage it. But again, it doesn't solve the problem, which is that it's causing anxiety in the first place. It's a technique or a strategy we use to escape, but actually we can't escape because the technology is not going away. And so the second thing we do is that we try and remedy things. So examples of this would be with things like email, where we decide, I'm only going to check my email twice a day, or I'm not going to put my phone on the table when I'm having dinner with my partner. I'm going to give them my full attention and my presence. And so we come up with these little strategies and techniques to sort of make it a little bit better. But when your phone's off, it's not really off, because things are still coming into it, and there's still anxiety in the mind. I always joke about silent mode on your phone. There is no silent mode on your phone, because there's probably still tension in the body or anxiety about that presentation you've got to do, or that email backlog, or the holiday you've not booked yet, or whatever it is. And so I'm most interested in this third strategy, which is redesign. So how do we actually redesign our technologies entirely so that they're intrinsically positive? And the question I sort of ask is, for those of you who are developers or technologists or strategists in the room, or people just who engage and passionate about this stuff, which you clearly are because you're here, what are we placing at the center of our technologies? My challenge is that the opportunity is for us to put the human being back into the center of the technologies, our well-being at the back of the center of our technologies. I talk about the catchphrase I use is, can we design technologies with our mind in mind? Because what's happening right now is that what's at the center of our technologies, it's basically advertising revenue. That's a very shorthand way of that. The basic business models of how which underpin our technologies is advertising revenue, which by definition is distraction, because it's trying to make you look at something else or buy something else, and so on. And so we wonder why our minds are distracted. It's because we've designed our technologies in a way that is about moving our mind from here to there. And so the challenge is, how do we put our well-being back into the center? And so, because the opportunity here is to learn how to relate to our devices, to our software, to our digital lives in such a way that is positive. Like, this stuff's not going away, and it's only going to get more and more pervasive. And so if we don't now start thinking about learning how to relate to our technology in a positive way, then it might be too late. And it'll have happened on our watch. And so I think we have to be quite responsible to that. And I think we're ready. A lot of people sort of say, well, this is a really idealistic idea, and like, welcome to the real world where people have to do all that sort of stuff. But my sort of tracing back my personal story and my experience is that in the history of meditation, 500 years ago, even 50 years ago, people would say, people who, like non-monastics cannot do this. That was the point of view. probably just 100 years ago. It was exclusively a thing. This whole idea of training the mind for positive results isn't for you. It's not for normal people. And over the last 50 years, we've seen that erode, and we're seeing thousands and millions of people around the world sort of enjoy the benefits of this. And I think the next thing is because we separate. We sort of say, no, digital is not. We can never have a positive relationship with technology because that's what it's like. I think that's a very limiting point of view. I think we're absolutely ready. And what's really exciting is that right now is there's a really interesting I'm sort of standing here as part of a generation of entrepreneurs and developers and technologists who have grown up like this. I could name 24 amazing startups across the world whose CEOs or founders have this experience of not only deep, be it meditation experience or neuroscience or psychology, but also deep technology experience. And because we're the first generation who've sort of grown up in a very digital world, and also in a very sort of interested in our inner lives as well. And so we're going to see a really exciting flourishing of this work, and so we can all look forward to that. So I was going to sort of finish this sort of first presentation bit sort of just with a sort of my closing idea, which is the inner life is really important. And the thing is that when it comes to technology, we talk about technology as everyone knows that the sort of rate of change is incredibly fast. But the thing is, we talk about technology, and those of you, some of you will be very familiar with this idea of Moore's law, is that the sort of the rate of change of technology grows exponentially every year and so on. The problem is, as human beings, we haven't kept up. Our inner technologies haven't kept up. We've been putting so much attention into our outer technology, we've not, as human beings, gained the skills or the understanding in which to deal with it. And so my invitation is that we become less obsessed. Like our outer technology is important, but we can use our outer technology to turn back and support our inner lives and our inner technology. And that's sort of the invitation that I want to leave you with, which is that it's a really lovely moment right now, which is there's so many things possible in this space, but if we don't do this, let's think about what happens if we don't, is that the external technology world just keeps on changing, and we're unable to keep up. And that's a race that if we don't invest our time and attention into, it's going to be really hard to deal with the downstream effects of it. So I invite everyone to sort of, if there's any sort of message we want to take away from today, it's to how can we put in our own work, whatever that work is, how do we put the human back into how we understand technology? So thanks.
Beh, io ringrazio Rohan e non so quanti parlano inglese, alzino la mano. Quindi vedo alcune mani non alzate. Provo a fare una breve riassunto per chi non conosce bene la lingua, ed è giusto che condividiamo con tutti il pensiero che Rohan ha espresso. I try to give a quick translation for people in the room that don't know English that well. Direi che i concetti fondamentali che Rohan ha detto sono, partendo dalla sua esperienza in cui lui ha iniziato a meditare anni fa in una foresta dove praticamente si stava ore e ore in silenzio al sole, costretti a essere senza rasarsi i capelli, le sopracciglia, in un regime molto, diciamo, duro, se vogliamo, no? La meditazione l'abbiamo tutti, chi non è pratico di meditazione ha in mente più quel tipo di approccio tradizionale. In realtà poi, avendo lui un'esperienza nel mondo della consulenza aziendale, avendo lavorato in Accenture, vivendo a Londra, si è reso conto come quelle belle immagini della foresta che ha mostrato all'inizio vivessero ancora dentro di sé, e come fosse importante per lui continuare a vivere questo momento di meditazione anche nella vita quotidiana per renderla migliore, e quindi non voleva perdere questa bella esperienza che aveva fatto là fuori, ma non voleva neanche perdere l'opportunità di andare da Barnes Noble o piuttosto al bar, al pub a farsi la birra con i suoi amici. E quindi da qui è nato il suo interesse proprio a sviluppare un percorso nella direzione che lo vede oggi essere il fondatore di questa app Buddhify, che lo porta un po' a far vedere, a ricentrare tutti noi sul punto che in fondo questa tecnologia, è vero, ci tiene legati e ci porta quasi sempre ad un concetto di ansia e di stress per tutte le mail non lette, per tutti i messaggi che ci arrivano, che ci stressano nella nostra giornata, ma in realtà lui pone anche l'accento sul fatto che ci vuole anche un modo di approcciare la tecnologia con distacco, grazie anche al design con cui in certi casi la tecnologia si pone verso di noi. Ma adesso credo che la cosa interessante sono alcune domande che stanno arrivando per capire bene. Ci ha spiegato Ron come, grazie anche alla sua app o alcune situazioni che noi stessi possiamo cercare in rete per trovare degli spunti per meditare, per fermarci, e Buddhify permette di farlo in qualsiasi momento della giornata, perché sia che si vada in palestra piuttosto che a dormire, piuttosto che fare una passeggiata, ci sono diversi spunti per fare meditazione anche velocemente e senza dover per forza porsi in un ambito quasi monastico. Ma la domanda che ci viene, credo tutti spontanea, è anche Luca Conti di Pandemia Info, che è qua in sala, ringrazio per la domanda. La domanda che viene spontanea è: come si fa poi a conciliare, ad utilizzare la tecnologia e a non stressarci, e soprattutto, aspetta che la leggo letteralmente, Luca ci dice in particolar modo, ecco le notifiche carine di Twitter, si sta arenando la mia, eccolo qua, ce la posso fare, ne prendo un'altra nel frattempo. Aiutami Luca che non ti sento, di la tua ad alta voce direttamente. Luca.
Sì, qualche consiglio su come riequilibrare il nostro rapporto con la tecnologia?
La domanda che fa Luca, che credo sia venuta a tutti noi sentendoti e vedendoti così zen, è what are your advice in order to approach technology without getting stressed and overwhelmed by it, and what is the trick that we can actually implement in our daily life?
Okay, so there's one key way, there's one key thing, and I'll also give you sort of 3 practical things right now. So, is this on?
Microfono, e maybe Ron,
Okay, sorry, I'll say that again. So, I'll give you there's a general sort of key thing to do, but also I'll share sort of 3 practical techniques we can do right now. So the key thing is when we're engaging with whatever technology product it is, whether it's your phone or whatever app or software, or the number one tip I would say is to pay attention to what it feels like in the body when you're doing certain things. So, for example, if you notice that, so I was talking to someone here that there's this very popular game, Flappy Bird, that was in the news recently, and it makes you really frustrated, and it's because it's quite a difficult game. And so, if you pay close attention to what your experience is like, instead of thinking about the screen, sort of while you're playing it, think about what's happening inside, and you might notice that you get very tense or frustrated. Particular parts of your body might get really stressed. What you're doing in that moment is you're training yourself to be like that. When you sort of look at your experience in that way, you have a choice. Like, do I want to train myself in frustration? And that gives you the sort of the insight that actually that's not necessarily the world I want to bring. I want to create. And I think the thing is, when the way that meditation works, the sort of the secret of it is that when your mind sees that something negative, if I do X, something negative happens, and when your mind sees that, it'll just stop doing. It'll learn by itself to stop doing X. And so the key, my number one tip is to really pay attention to what it feels like to engage with your technology. So some things might be really lovely. So you might use your Facebook in a certain way that really generates a sense of kindness or affection for others. And so, oh, that's actually really nice. And so, why don't I continue to do that? Because that's something I want to support in myself. But also just sort of looking inside as to what happens when you use technology. I think.
Let me translate a little bit for the audience. So, thank you, Ron. So, Ron sta dicendo, per chi, sempre per la piccola traduzione, che offriamo anche a chi ci ascolta in rete, e che fondamentalmente uno dei consigli per rispondere a Luca Conti e a chi si è posto questa domanda è che quando ci imponiamo nei confronti della tecnologia, da qualsiasi azione facciamo, il consiglio è cercare di non farsi prendere dalla tensione che l'oggetto magari ci porta ad avere. Magari parlava prima con qualcuno di alcuni giochi che si fanno in rete che con l'ansia anche da prestazione di fare bene il gioco, questo gioco ci porta ad avere dentro una tensione, e lui dice fermatevi e allontanate questa tensione, non facciamoci prendere dall'ansia perché c'è l'oggetto che vive e non è mai spento, come ha detto nel suo discorso iniziale. Anche se lo mettiamo nel mode silent, in realtà il telefono è sempre acceso, ma noi dobbiamo imparare, grazie anche appunto, poi è un concetto anche della meditazione, a staccare, cioè a fare un passo indietro e non essere presi da tutti gli input che questo oggetto ci propone in continuazione.
Yeah, and there's one so within Buddhify there's a whole section about meditations for whilst you're online, and that's sort of been very popular recently. And the one technique that people like the most is when you're using, whether it's email or social media, we can tend to just see it as information. It's just information. But if you spend a small amount of time, even if it's just 5 seconds, to think about the human being who's sent that information, or if you're about to write an email, before you write it, just spend 5 seconds, 10 seconds, as long as you want, as short as you want, to actually think about and reflect on that person as you know them. And suddenly it becomes a human-to-human relationship rather than an information-to-information relationship. And that's actually really powerful. And I think one of the reasons that things like internet trolling and things like that exist and internet bullying exist is because people lose contact with the other person. They don't see them as a person, they just see it as a photo and some information. And so whatever it takes for us to reconnect with the sense of, oh, it's Daniela, about to write an email to Daniela, let's remember the last time we spent time together, and write that email with a sense of that memory. That can be a really nice way to communicate, and that's actually quite a powerful technique.
Io non so chi di voi ha capito, ma ha detto una cosa molto semplice e banale, Rohan, però credo che tutti noi, in qualsiasi lavoro facciamo, insomma in qualsiasi condizione, le parole che ha detto sono sacre. Cioè, quando si utilizza la tecnologia non è perché abbiamo un oggetto che ci intermedia e media la relazione, che ci dobbiamo dimenticare di chi c'è dall'altra parte. E quindi è importante di ricordarsi che quando sto per mandare un'email, un text, un SMS, un Facebook, quello che sia, ricordiamo chi è l'uomo, l'essere umano che c'è dall'altro lato della comunicazione, e magari ci fermiamo 5 secondi, e quei 5 secondi ci possono anche aiutare a evitare di rendere a volte la comunicazione così poco umana che si crea con questi oggetti, e che poi ingenera situazioni che non fanno stare bene. Quindi sta anche a noi aiutare la comunicazione, a incanalarla in modo che non crei queste deviazioni. Per esempio lui dice il bullismo, il trolling, tutte certe attività devianti che avvengono in rete a volte sono proprio la derivazione, il derivato di questo atteggiamento per cui ciascuno di noi si dimentica che c'è una persona, un essere umano dall'altra parte. Quindi ricordiamocelo, ecco, questa è una cosa interessante. We have more questions here coming in. Provo a leggere qualche altra domanda, poiché sono un po' di parte, essendo donna, avendo una vita come molte donne complessa. Ringrazio anche l'assessore al benessere del Comune di Milano che è qui, che è Chiara Visconti, che per anni ha lottato per quello che è il work-life balance, e in relazione a questo tema che a noi donne è molto caro, ma è caro anche agli uomini perché fa parte poi dell'equilibrio della famiglia, delle donne e di tutti noi. La domanda che arrivava da un utente è Come fa soprattutto una donna con... adesso stanno arrivando tantissime domande, quindi faccio un po' la figura della lenta, ma vado a memoria, e la domanda era, adesso la recupero letteralmente, come fa una donna a conciliare tra lavoro, famiglia, obblighi con la scuola per seguire tutte le vicende familiari e anche meditare, cioè dove lo trova il tempo. The question is from a woman that is saying, as us as women, we are busy with and we have the key issue of work-life balance. We work, we have family, we have to take care and look after children or parents, and we have our personal life. And how can we find time to meditate and create our own moment of, switching off?
Well, that's the reason I made the app in the first place, because it's about the first thing you have to do is get rid of the assumption that you need special time. So it's very, very useful to have that sort of special quiet time, be it 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, in which to do traditional silent meditation practice. But like you say, lots of people don't have those moments. And so it's a case of learning so that's where the whole concept of Buddhify came from, which is how do we use the situations we're in to develop that. And so there's so many different, so there's several sort of core types of meditation. Things like body awareness, things like looking at your mind, things like compassion or kindness practice. You can use, so when, for example, we're developing new tracks for Buddhify, and there are new tracks coming in, things around housework, parenting, because in the app we have a way for users to message us to tell us what other content they want, and we've had like 500 different requests, and so we're basically going to make those things. And so the way we write that content is we do some housework. So we basically go into that situation and then think right now, this is what's happening. How can I be more aware of my body right now? How can I develop a sense of kindness? So whether it's when you're cooking, can you reflect on, you can do basic mindfulness practice by just being very, cooking is a very sensual experience. You use your hands a lot. There's these amazing smells, certainly in Italy. And
I will let you talk with some housewives after and test what they think about that.
But so there's all these opportunities. There's so much stuff happening. So to develop mindfulness in that situation, all we have to do is to decide to do that. So instead of paying attention to what we're doing next, just pay attention to what's happening. The feeling of the knife in our hand. What does that smell really like? What does that food really smell like? And can we really become quite intimate with that? Because that is happening right now. And that's the key thing.
So, thank you. La risposta, che poi era Medusa in rosso, il nick della persona che ci ha scritto, che ringraziamo per averci scritto. La risposta di Rohan è, anche qui, se vogliamo, di buon senso, sembra forse un po' banale, ma io mi ci sono trovata nelle situazioni che lui racconta. È chiaro che una donna che è impegnata, fa 1000 attività, e cucina e sta già pensando a quello che deve fare dopo cena, il giorno dopo, le faccende di casa, chi deve telefonare. In realtà lui dice basta veramente poco, non è che c'è proprio bisogno di mettersi lì a meditare e come fai, non c'è il tempo. Allora dice magari anche quando cuciniamo. Cucinare, lui dice, è un'esperienza molto sensuale, è un'esperienza manuale, allora che tocca i vari sensi che noi abbiamo. Allora dice, magari mentre cuciniamo, smettiamo un attimo di pensare alla cosa che devo fare un attimo dopo, rimaniamo nel qui e ora e godiamo di quei piccoli momenti che possono essere il profumo che sprigiona la verdura che stiamo tagliando piuttosto che il coltello che stiamo impugnando. Mi veniva da fargli la battuta che magari il coltello che impugniamo possiamo poi usarlo per qualche attività più meno buona dopo, però fondamentalmente il concetto è: fermiamoci, usiamo quel momento in cui stiamo facendo quella cosa per godercelo, per distaccarci dal resto, altrimenti veniamo inghiottiti, e soprattutto cerchiamo di focalizzarci su alcune parole magiche della meditazione, come appunto la consapevolezza del proprio corpo, la compassione, la gentilezza, e poi vabbè, ovviamente Rohan racconta che la sua app è fatta proprio apposta per trovare in ogni momento, volendo, della giornata una meditazione specifica, e loro hanno lasciato, non so chi di voi se l'è scaricata, la possibilità di suggerire delle guide di meditazione dedicate, e hanno avuto più di 500 richieste e stanno attivando delle guide per chi è genitore, per chi fa il mestiere di casa, e quindi ci saranno anche delle guide di meditazione per queste attività della donna, non solo diciamo dedita alla meditazione. Abbiamo una domanda dalla sala. Gianfranco, Chicco.
Yeah, Rohan, apologies for this question. A few days ago you were asking to us users of Buddhify, and I've been using it since the first version a couple of years ago, would you like it to be more social? And when I think about meditation, it's something very intimate, you know, it's something, I don't even tweet that I'm using the app, you know, which is one of the features after you finish each of the meditations. I wonder, what would you be interested in exploring about meditation or mindfulness and the sociality, you know, thinking about social media?
Yeah, I think that it's a really great question, Gianfranco. I think historically, meditation practice has always been social. So it's always been, although some people think of it as the stereotype is the solo person on a mountaintop by themselves. The reality is, in the forests of Thailand, everyone's supporting each other. There's lots of people, there's an opportunity to, because this isn't necessarily always easy stuff to do, because when you look at your mind, it can be quite difficult, and so you, whether it's teachers or other practitioners, that sense of community is really important, has historically always been really important. And so I'm interested in, as we extend Buddhify and grow it, so that's the question I asked on Twitter, is how do we do that in a way that feels appropriate? And I think the thing that I'm most interested in is how do we get, so we have all these users around the world, and they themselves are learning tips and tricks, because Buddhify started from my experience and my hacking meditation. And now, through Buddhify, there are lots and lots of people around the world who are starting to do that themselves. So I'm interested in how can we share that intelligence, not just sort of showing off, hey, I meditated for 10 hours yesterday, check me out, which isn't really what a great thing to train in, that sort of vanity, but it's more around, how can I help someone out who's maybe, so a question like Daniela spoke out just now, which is, can we create a system where someone says, actually, I'm a mother of 2, and they're young children, and I'm trying to, and then there's intelligence, I think, in the Buddhify community, and certainly in the future, to provide those tips. And I've always wanted the Buddhify to not be about me, but to be about, that's why I'm not sort of, traditionally meditation is taught by the guru, who's like the super cool guy, and everyone just follows them. I want Buddhify to be meditation for the people, by the people, and so I'm interested in how we create a platform for that intelligence to be shared. So that's where I see the opportunity, and I think where everyone's supporting each other and coming up with ideas. In the same way that there are all sorts of, like Instructables, where, hey, I learned how to hack together this crazy thing with my vacuum so I can do this other thing. I'd love that to be in the domain of mental health. Hey, I learned how to use my phone to have a better relationship with my mum. I want those stories to be shared. I think that's really useful.
Grazie Rohan. Rohan cita sulla domanda di Gianfranco, che era per sapere, ma può essere, visto che siamo nella Social Media Week, come può essere la meditazione, che è più un atto individuale, spirituale quasi, come può essere anche la meditazione vista in una modalità social, soprattutto con i social media. C'è una correlazione, e lui dice sicuramente sì, al di là del fatto che con le app come le sue tu puoi dire ho meditato 10 ore questa settimana e carezzare il proprio ego sociale, ma non è tanto quella l'obiettivo. Lui dice è fondamentale, come i monaci nella foresta thailandese, si è in gruppo anche se si medita singolarmente, e il gruppo fa un po' anche la forza della meditazione. Lui dice anche con gli strumenti della tecnologia, degli smartphone, meditare, utilizzare queste tecniche di meditazione online con i vari strumenti che uno può utilizzare è una forma anche di condivisione, può servire come forma anche di condivisione di soluzioni per star meglio. Magari facevamo prima appunto le battute sulla donna che lavora, che è impegnata, che deve seguire la famiglia, può essere anche un modo per condividere delle tecniche senza esasperare. Sto asciugando i capelli col phon e provo una sensazione magnifica, provatela perché state meglio, però il concetto è magari trovando delle piccole soluzioni sui problemi quotidiani. La rete ci può aiutare, e questo lo sappiamo tutti noi che siamo qua seduti, a condividere, e quindi anche la meditazione nelle piccole soluzioni quotidiane che riusciamo a trovare, come quella molto preziosa che ci ha detto prima, che sappiamo tutti ma non applichiamo, di fermarci 5 minuti prima di andare alla mail. Ecco, condividere questo sapere, queste piccole perle di saggezza può essere un valore per aumentare anche il benessere collettivo. Se abbiamo ancora tempo, mi fanno sì dalla regia, ci sono un sacco di altre domande, e ne provo a dare un paio a rullo a Rohan e vediamo cosa ci risponde. C'è una domanda provocatoria di Marco Mazzei che dice: sono più brave le donne o gli uomini a meditare e a staccare la spina? I start giving you some questions and then you answer. One is are women better than men or vice versa in meditation and to the ability of switching off? And then we have another question that is very interesting, un'altra domanda molto interessante che ci fa Riccardo Pinna, che mi sono posta anch'io e ne parlavo con lui oggi pomeriggio via Skype quando ci preparavamo al panel. Se lo smartphone è parte integrante delle nostre ansie, è giusto mantenere il cordone per sfuggirgli? So the other question from Roberto Pina is, if the smartphone is one of the integrating parts of our frustrations and anxieties, is the smartphone or the iPad the right tool to escape from them? Is this kind of?
Yeah, I'll answer that first, and then the women-men thing. I feel yes, because I think it's good to go to the heart of the problem. Like, otherwise, we're just escaping from it and we're saying that no, we can't use technology in that way. If people are using more technologies, because it's important to think about ignore the fact that it's technology, focus on the result. So if the result is more calm, less stress, more compassion, more kindness, that's what we want. And whether we use technology or not, then I don't really mind. I'm interested in creating and supporting an environment where we have more of those positive things. And the fact is, so that there are people who, for their phone is a part of them. Like, they almost literally consider it part of their self. And so that is, and whether you agree with that's a good thing or not, to have that opportunity to use it in a positive way, then I think, because ultimately, like, if how great would it be if every interaction with our phone resulted in a positive experience? Suddenly our phone would be a well-being device instead of a stress device, and I think that's a good ambition.
A rispondere a Roberto Pin, Rohan dice perché dobbiamo usare il telefono che poi ci stressa per rilassarci, e lui dice, visto che dobbiamo farci i conti tutti quanti, cioè fa parte della nostra, è ormai un'estensione che, volenti o nolenti, i telefoni e gli smartphone fanno parte della nostra vita quotidiana in maniera presente, costante, meglio usarli per stare poi bene che continuare a vivere la dicotomia e lo stress dell'oggetto. Quindi già che dobbiamo utilizzarlo, utilizziamolo in modo che ci aiuti a restituirci indietro dei valori di calma, di how did you say calm, all the positive values della meditazione, cioè di rilassamento, e ci rimandi indietro delle vibrazioni positive piuttosto che negative, cioè visto che dobbiamo usarlo, usiamolo bene, questo è un po' il concetto.
Sure, and on the sort of female-male thing, I think it's a good question. I think generally, just looking at my information that I have, like Buddhify has probably about 60% female and 40% male audience. And I think in the same way, it's hard to generalize. I think it's very unfair to generalize, but I think perhaps women are quicker to maybe look at their inner life and recognize that their emotional life as being something worth attending to. In the same way that, so someone living in the UK, which is a very conservative culture compared to Europe and to Italy and the States, so American people are much more likely to explore, because there's much more of a culture of therapy and introspection and all that kind of self-help culture is much bigger in the US. So I think it's no different to that. Like, women might be more interested than men, and Americans are more interested in British people. But also, there are different styles of meditation. Like, there's a very, I call them, well, actually, there's very masculine styles of meditation and very feminine styles. And people are attracted to different types. So masculine styles are very goal-oriented, and they're all about achieving things and getting rid of things. And feminine styles of meditation are much more about openness and just resting with how things are right now. And both are, I think, as a man, I use all those different styles, just different times for different things.
Alla domanda se sono più brave le donne o gli uomini a switch off, a spegnere e a rilassarsi, lui dice che le statistiche della sua app dicono che il 60% sono donne e il 40% uomini, e dice, pur essendo difficile generalizzare, diciamo che le donne forse sono più brave a guardare dentro se stesse e imparano più in fretta a mettersi in gioco e a trovare una via per migliorare. E sicuramente gli uomini hanno più l'obiettivo di andare a risolvere problemi per migliorare, per più legati agli obiettivi, a funzionare meglio, legati alla performance, a raggiungere qualche risultato, mentre le donne sono più legate alla meditazione per aprirsi e per stare proprio meglio con se stesse. If we have another 5 minutes, or you tell me from the...
I'll also say something that Buddhify is currently only available in English, but I'm talking to lots of people because we've got lots of interest for translations, and Italian being one. So we're in discussions with someone to translate and record and edit it in Italian. So in the same way, so that's something we hope to do. I'm not sure when that would be, but it's something we hope to do. In the same way that it's currently only on iOS, and we hope to do an Android version as well.
Ha fatto una nota sulla sua app che oggi è solo in iOS, dice che diventerà in Android, ma ho letto sul suo sito che parte che sarebbe costato troppo, quindi intanto è uscito con iOS e poi uscirà con Android, e che prima o poi le inizierà a tradurre anche in italiano. E io ho letto un suggerimento che gli passo, che sarebbe anche utile, oltre ad avere le parole scandite della meditazione, vederle anche scritte. I was saying that I read a comment that was suggesting you, and I agree, that maybe beside the words it would be useful to have the text, so the people that don't really understand very well the sound could be helpful maybe to
I'll put it on the whiteboard.
And anyway, so certo è un dibattito, ci piacerebbe anche sentire voi dal pubblico qua, cioè solo da fuori, o siete qua dentro e ci mandate le domande, cioè potete anche farle dal vivo. La farmacia Serra, che sono qui davanti, dei storici, blogger, qualche domanda alla farmacia Serra? Beh, ci hanno scritto dei commenti interessanti in rete, tra cui il fatto che faceva notare prima Rohan nella presentazione, il servizio sanitario inglese considera le pratiche di mindfulness e quindi meditazione come delle pratiche previste dal servizio sanitario per curare forme diciamo disfunzioni, forme di patologie anche lievi o meno lievi come l'ansia, la depressione, mentre qua in Italia a fatica abbiamo i rimborsi neanche, non solo pubblici, neanche privati per questo tipo di patologie, quindi sono un po' più avanti di noi in questo. Abbiamo anche un'altra domanda da aiuto. eccoci qua, ce la posso fare. Niente, sei incartato, eccolo qui. Cosa pensa Rohan della of yoga organization where meditation is part of something else? Inspiring. I read it in English. What does Rohan think of yoga organization where meditation is part of someone SMT, something else? Is part of something else. Inspire new people, change life habit. What do you think about yoga organization where meditation is part of something else? Like inspiring people, change life habits.
I think the great thing about this kind of space is there's so much diversity to it. I don't think that there's one way of doing these things. And so whether yoga's a way in for people is a very common way into this kind of thing, because often at the end of a yoga class there might be a 5-10 minute meditation at the end. It's very normal. And that's a really nice way to get into this kind of thing. I think people who say there's only one way of doing it, I always instantly think that's something to avoid, because there's so many different personalities and different ways of understanding it. And for Buddhify, like Buddhify itself, for me the purpose of it is to people learn the techniques so that they integrate them into their real life, into their normal life. And so my ambition is not that someone uses Buddhify every day for 10 years. I would like them to learn use it long enough so that they learn that internalize the technique, so that they don't need the app anymore, and they're able to just walk around in their normal city life and they become a meditation hacker by themselves.
Allora, la domanda era se cosa ne pensava Rohan del fatto che ci sono organizzazioni yoga che puntano molto alla meditazione e come modo complementare anche di pensare ad altro, di ispirarsi, e secondo Rohan cioè, è normale, lo yoga e altre pratiche permettono di fare questo, ma sicuramente il suo obiettivo con questo tipo di app chiunque faccia proponga questo tipo di pratiche attraverso le app e della tecnologia non è tanto circoscrivere a quel momento determinato della meditazione con il telefonino il proprio esercizio, ma farlo entrare nella propria vita quotidiana senza doversi connettere in continuazione, cioè attendere. In teoria non dovremmo neanche più connetterci a un'app come quella di Rohan per meditare, ma dovremmo noi stessi internalizzarlo, diciamo, come momento quotidiano per star meglio. Abbiamo una domanda da Farmacia Serra, vedi?
Volevo sapere se avevi dei bambini che utilizzavano la tua app e se reputi che possa essere un buon veicolo per avvicinare i bambini alla meditazione.
The question is if you have or know of kids that are using your app, and if you think that your app or this kind of apps can be a good tool or a good vehicle for having kids learn meditation.
Yeah, I do know. I've heard of examples where people, sort of parents, are using it with their children. It's not. I haven't designed it specifically for children, and so that's sort of like a byproduct. There are some. There's a couple of apps out there which are designed specifically for children, which are really good. There's one called Smiling Mind in Australia, which is a really nice product, and meditation and mindfulness in schools, not using technology, is becoming a much more popular thing. Again, I've seen it grow a lot in the UK and the US as well, and so that's really encouraging, I think. And sort of not secretly, because I'm obviously a bit on live stream, but I think this whole area of parenting and young children, because I think it's as much for the parent as it is for the child, because of the experience of parenting is a challenging one. And I think as someone who now that my friends are starting to have children and I may have a family soon as well, it's going to be an increasingly important thing for me. And so I'm interested in, I don't think Buddhify is the thing for that, but I'm interested in how do we create, maybe, so we have in our sort of list of prototypes we're working on are things in this space as well for the next thing.
Oh, this is an anticipation, rumor.
Very early stages.
Quindi per rispondere, sicuramente è importante tutto il mondo dei genitori, dei figli e dei bambini. Anche in Australia c'è un'app che lui raccomanda, Smiling Mind, per i bambini, e in altri paesi sono più avanti di noi nell'usare queste tecniche anche per far star meglio i bambini e la relazione tra i bambini e i genitori. Quindi sicuramente è una strada interessante, e lui adesso ci ha anticipato, anche se dice che non è proprio un'anticipazione, che lavorerà non con Buddhify ma probabilmente in futuro con un altro prodotto pensato proprio per questa direzione, visto che si sta avvicinando all'età di far famiglia e i suoi amici stanno iniziando a mettere su famiglia. C'è un'altra domanda lì?
If you could share some practical thing, to start us in meditation today, now that you're here in person, it could be a couple of minutes and stuff. What would be the first step that you would suggest us to do, and maybe do it now?
Sure, I think in the spirit of Social Media Week, I think it should involve our phones. So there's a really important idea in meditation, which this idea of the present moment, and being able to be in touch with the present moment. And so whether you've got an iPad or a phone, there's something very simple you can do, which is just feel what it feels like, because the sensation, so you can do it now. You just get your phone out and just don't worry what's on the screen, but just the simple sensation of holding that and feeling the smoothness, the different textures. There's a bit of, there's a sort of an interest on that sort of apple bit. There's a sort of very different experience, and then you've got these sort of textures. Like, that's happening. That is the present moment for you right now. And so, the great thing about phones is that they're physical. They won't be physical for very long. So let's enjoy them while they are. So the fact that we have this funny lump of plastic and metal in our pockets all the times means that at any moment we have a thing which can bring us back into the present moment. It's a very, very simple, it seems almost too simple, but the way you can, and then the more you do that, it's very interesting. The more you do that, if you do that maybe like once a day, just spend 5 seconds just feeling the phone and going, this is actually what's happening right now. Over time, your brain will make the connection between holding your phone and presence, so that if you do that over time, so days, weeks, months, every time you make a call or someone texts you and you come out to, your brain will have associated the present moment with that device, and you'll have trained yourself to be present there. And that's a really, really simple thing, but that would be my number, sort of a really sort of simple tip for that.
And you would share it with your friends, you were saying? You would invite to share it, this practice with your friends?
No, it's just like, there are other, this is just quite a personal, it's just like a thing, because it's something we've always got. It's like, if you think of like a touchstone, or like, it makes you think that being in touch with the present moment is always available. It's always in your pocket, and that idea is a really important one. And over time, can reframe your relationship to your phone to be one of presence. So that would be my my social media week meditation tip.
Quindi la sua tip sarebbe quella di, per tutti noi, prendere in mano uno dei nostri oggetti quotidiani che conosciamo bene, e però anziché prenderlo come momento di stress e di velocità, accarezzarlo, toccarlo e, come dire, sentirlo con le sensazioni piacevoli che può dare, e quindi focalizzarsi sul presente e apprezzare questo momento, anche perché lui dice oggi ci sono questi oggetti, domani potrebbero anche non esserci. E io direi che con questo tips, secondo me, possiamo avviarci a chiudere la sessione, se non ci sono altre domande. E quindi ringrazierei Rohan, thank you, e grazie a tutti voi per essere venuti.